Recent reports from the North Lake Processing Facility in Michigan provide a contemporary entry point into the broader logic of hunger strikes as a form of protest. In April 2026, hundreds of immigration detainees refused food, describing conditions marked by prolonged and uncertain detention, limited access to legal communication, and what they characterized as degrading daily living circumstances. Some participants indicated that the delays and opacity of their cases had become so severe that they preferred deportation over continued confinement, a reversal that underscores the depth of perceived institutional failure. These developments do not stand in isolation. They emerge within a rapidly expanding detention system, where capacity increases have coincided with mounting allegations of overcrowding, inadequate medical care, and restricted contact with the outside world. Within this environment, formal grievance mechanisms appear, from the detainee's perspective, either ineffective or inaccessible. The hunger strike thus becomes legible not as an impulsive act, but as a structured response to a system in which conventional avenues of redress have lost credibility. Hunger strikes are not random or impulsive acts. They tend to emerge when several underlying conditions converge. If you read them backward, they function as a diagnostic signal about the prison system that produced them. First, they indicate a breakdown of ordinary grievance channels. In most prison systems, there are formal mechanisms for complaints, administrative reviews, legal appeals, oversight bodies. When prisoners resort to self-starvation, it usually implies those channels are perceived as ineffective, inaccessible, or retaliatory. The logic is straightforward. If lower-cost options worked, the highest-cost option would not be used. So a hunger strike often points to institutional deafness or procedural blockage. Second, they suggest conditions experienced as intolerable rather than merely difficult. Prisons are inherently restrictive, but hunger strikes typically arise around specific thresholds: prolonged solitary confinement, indefinite detention without trial, denial of medical care, or systematic humiliation. The act of refusing food signals that the perceived harm of continued compliance exceeds even the risk of severe bodily damage. That inversion, preferring deterioration over continuation, indicates extreme conditions. Third, they reflect asymmetry of power with no alternative leverage. Incarcerated individuals lack economic, political, and physical means of influence. A hunger strike converts the only remaining controllable variable, their own body, into leverage. This reveals a structural imbalance. When one side has near total control, resistance shifts inward and becomes self-directed. The protest is therefore not just about conditions, but about the absence of any balanced mechanism of negotiation. Fourth, they imply a struggle over recognition and legitimacy. Many hunger strikes are not solely about material conditions, but about status, being treated as political prisoners, being acknowledged as having rights, or being seen as human, rather than purely custodial subjects. The protest communicates that the existing system denies a form of recognition the prisoners consider fundamental. In that sense, the strike is both a material and symbolic demand. Fifth, they expose reputational vulnerability in the system. Hunger strikes are effective only if authorities are sensitive to public perception. The act is designed to generate external scrutiny: media, courts, international observers. This indicates that the prison system operates within a broader legitimacy framework and is not fully insulated from moral or political pressure. Where that sensitivity is low, strikes tend to escalate in severity, including death fasts, which signals a harsher equilibrium between authority and resistance. Finally, they reveal cyclical patterns of escalation. Once hunger strikes occur, the system often enters a feedback structure. Poor conditions or ignored grievances lead to protest. Protest triggers coercive responses, like force-feeding or isolation. Coercion reinforces perceptions of injustice. Further protests escalate. This cycle indicates that the underlying issue is not a single policy failure, but a systemic misalignment between authority and those subjected to it. Taken together, hunger strikes tell you less about isolated incidents and more about the structural properties of a prison system. How it handles dissent, whether it maintains credible channels for redress, how it balances control with legitimacy, and where it sits on the spectrum between managed custody and coercive containment.